The morning mist clings to the gravestones like forgotten prayers as I walk the familiar path through Arlington, my daughter's medal heavy in my coat pocket. 5 years today since Captain Sarah Mitchell left this world, or so the official report claimed. A training accident, they said, quick and painless, they promised. The lie sits in my throat like broken glass, though I didn't know it was a lie until this moment. My boots crunch on frost-covered grass, and I rehearse the words I'll say to her granite marker, the same hollow ritual I perform every year. But something's different today. 2 figures kneel at her grave, silhouetted against the rising sun, and my heart stops. The man wears full Navy SEAL dress uniform, his broad shoulders squared in perfect military posture as he whispers something urgent to the small boy beside him. The child can't be more than 4 years old, his tiny hand resting on my daughter's headstone like he's done this before. I move closer, my breath catching, straining to hear the SEAL's words carried on. The cold wind. Your mama was the bravest person I ever knew, buddy. She saved a lot of people. The boy nods solemnly, clutching something white against his chest. My footsteps betray me, and the SEAL's head snaps up with the trained awareness of a man who's survived things most people can't imagine. He rises to his feet in one fluid motion, his hand instinctively moving toward his hip before recognition softens his battle-hardened features. General Mitchell, he says, his voice rough with emotion I don't understand yet. The boy turns too, and I see my daughter's eyes staring back at me from his innocent face, those same green eyes that used to light up when I'd come home from deployment. "Daddy, is that him?" the child asks, and the word daddy echoes through my chest like artillery fire. The SEAL's jaw tightens as he stands at attention, and I notice the envelope in the boy's small hands, addressed in handwriting that makes my knees weak. "Sir, my name is Lieutenant Commander James Parker. I served under Captain Mitchell's command. In operations you were never briefed on." His words hit like bullets, each one shattering the carefully constructed narrative I've lived with for 5 years. The cemetery suddenly feels smaller, the air thinner, as questions flood my mind faster than I can form them. But before I can speak, before I can demand the truth, I suddenly realize I desperately need. A black SUV tears through the cemetery gates, and the morning erupts into chaos. The envelope trembles in the boy's hands as Lieutenant Commander Parker holds my gaze, with the intensity of someone carrying secrets that have nearly killed him. His dress whites are immaculate, each ribbon and medal perfectly aligned, but I notice the slight tremor in his fingers, the kind that comes from too many nights without sleep, too many glances over your shoulder. "Captain Mitchell wasn't training recruits when she died, sir," he says, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "She was leading a deep-cover intelligence unit, tracking foreign operatives inside our own command. Structure, I was her second." The words slice through everything I thought I knew about my daughter's final months, and suddenly I'm remembering all the phone calls she couldn't explain, the reassignments that made no strategic sense, the tension in her voice during our last conversation. The boy steps forward with heartbreaking confidence, extending the envelope toward me with both hands, like it's made of glass. "Mommy said to give this to Grandpa on the anniversary," he says, and the word Grandpa detonates in my chest. I take the letter with shaking hands, my daughter's distinctive cursive swimming before my eyes, the same flowing script she practiced at my desk when she was 8 years old, determined to write like a soldier. Parker's jaw works as he watches me process this impossible information, and I see grief etched into the lines around his eyes. "Sir, I know this is—" he starts, but I cut him off, my general's voice returning even as my father's heart shatters. "How old is he?" I demand, doing the math that doesn't, I want to add up. Parker's expression softens as he places a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. 4 years and 7 months, sir. His name is Jacob." I look at the child, at Jacob, at my grandson, and see my daughter's determination in the set of his small jaw, her curiosity in the way he studies my face. "She never told me," I breathe, the accusation and hurt bleeding through despite my training. Parker shifts his weight, and for the first time, the perfect military bearing cracks. She was protecting you both, General. The targets she identified went high, higher than either of us anticipated. She documented everything, built an airtight case, but 3 days before she planned to bring it to the Inspector General, her vehicle went off that bridge. His voice hardens on those last words, and I understand what he's really saying. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. My daughter was assassinated, and someone powerful enough to alter official reports made sure it looked like negligence. The boy reaches up and touches my hand, his fingers impossibly small against my weathered palm. "Daddy says you're a hero like Mommy was," Jacob says with absolute faith, and something inside me that's been frozen for 5 years begins to crack. Parker meets my eyes again, and I see desperation there, a silent plea for belief, for help, for something I don't yet understand. "General Mitchell, there are people who would kill this child to keep what Sarah discovered buried," he says, his hand moving toward his hip again, this time with purpose. "And I think they just found us." The first shot doesn't announce itself with dramatic flair. It's a sharp crack that splits the peaceful morning air like breaking glass. And the marble angel above my daughter's headstone explodes into white powder that rains down on us like snow. Parker moves with the fluid precision of someone who's done this 1,000 times, his body already dropping as his arm sweeps Jacob off his feet and against his chest. "Down!" he barks at me with command authority that overrides even my general's instinct to assess before acting. We hit the grass behind Sarah's headstone as 3 more shots punch into the ground where we'd been standing seconds before, kicking up chunks of earth and the scent of disturbed soil that mingles with morning dew and cordite. I press myself against the cold granite, my dress uniform already grass-stained as tactical boots thunder across the cemetery lawn from multiple directions. Through the gap beside the headstone, I catch glimpses of men in black gear moving with professional coordination, not random attackers, but trained operators executing a coordinated assault. Parker has Jacob tucked beneath him like a shield, one hand covering the boy's head while the other finally completes that movement toward his hip, producing a compact Glock that shouldn't exist at a cemetery visit. "How many?" I hiss, my own combat training from decades past flooding back through veins that remember war even when the mind wants to forget. He risks a glance around the headstone's edge as bullets chip away at monuments around us, transforming this place of peace into a killing ground. 4 visible, probably 2 more flanking, Parker responds, with the calm assessment of someone calculating odds he doesn't like. Jacob whimpers against his father's chest, but doesn't cry out. This child has been trained for danger, prepared for moments that no 4-year-old should ever have to anticipate. The realization makes my blood run cold, even as another volley of shots forces us to press harder against Sarah's grave, and I'm struck by the terrible irony that we're seeking protection from the very marker that represents how my daughter died at these same people's hands, Parker's. Eyes meet mine across that small space, and I see the question there. Can you still fight, General, or have the years made you soft? I reach down and pull the tactical knife I still carry from my ankle sheath. Old habits die hard, even at memorial services, and give him the grim smile of a father who just learned his daughter was murdered. They chose the wrong grave to ambush, I growl, and Parker's expression shifts into something fierce and grateful as he chambers around and prepares to move. The men in black are closing in, their shadows falling across the headstones like darkness claiming sacred ground. But they've made one critical miscalculation. They've threatened my grandson at my daughter's grave, and I've got 30 years of warfare they're about to experience firsthand. The attackers' shadows retreat as suddenly as they appeared, their tactical withdrawal executed with the same precision as their assault. They weren't here to finish us, I realize with chilling clarity, but to deliver a message written in bullets and fear. Parker keeps Jacob compressed against his chest for 30 seconds longer, counting down some internal timer only operators understand, before finally rising into a crouch and scanning the cemetery with eyes that have mapped 1,000 potential kill zones. "Clear," he murmurs, but he doesn't holster the Glock, and I notice his hand trembles. Slightly now that the adrenaline is cresting, not from fear, but from something that looks like grief mixed with rage. He helps Jacob to his feet, checking the boy for injuries with gentle efficiency, whispering reassurances that Daddy's got him. Everything's okay, even though we all know nothing about this morning is okay. "Training accident," Parker says finally, turning to face me as Jacob clings to his leg, and his voice carries the weight of secrets that have been crushing him for 3 years. "That's what they told you, right? That Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen died during a routine naval exercise off the coast. Equipment malfunction, body recovered, full military honors, case closed." He spits the words like poison he's tired of tasting, and I feel my chest constrict because the way he says it makes my daughter's funeral feel like a performance I attended without knowing I was watching theater. "She didn't die in any accident, General. She was assassinated, executed by a criminal organization called the Broker because she got too close to something that would have burned their entire operation to ash." The morning sun seems to dim as he speaks, shadows lengthening across disturbed earth and shattered monuments, nature itself recoiling from the truth he's unveiling. Parker reaches into his jacket with careful movements, extracting a waterproof pouch that's been worn smooth from handling, and pulls out a flash drive that catches the light like a tiny star of captured evidence. "Your daughter was investigating anomalies in intelligence reports. Classified information appearing in places it shouldn't, operations compromised before they began, assets disappearing without explanation. She discovered the Broker, a syndicate that infiltrated military intelligence at the highest levels, selling secrets to whoever paid premium rates." His jaw clenches as memory tightens around him, and I see the moment on his face when he learned the woman he served under, the woman he clearly loved, had been marked for death. She compiled everything on this drive. Names, transactions, proof of treason that reaches into offices with stars on the door, and they killed her 3 days before she planned to expose them all. "Those men who just tried to kill us." Parker gestures toward the cemetery entrance, where our attackers vanished like smoke, his voice dropping to a whisper so Jacob won't fully comprehend. "The darkness we're discussing. They're cleanup crew for the Broker, and they've been hunting me for 3 years because Sarah gave me this evidence hours before she died, made me swear I'd protect it and finish what she started." He looks down at the flash drive resting in his scarred palm, like a grenade with an eternal fuse, then back at my face, where shock is slowly crystallizing into something harder and more dangerous. I've been running ever since, keeping Jacob hidden, waiting for the right moment to complete her mission. And now they know I've made contact with you, which means we're all targets until the Broker is destroyed or we're buried beside your daughter. The safe house materializes from Parker's paranoia. A forgettable ranch, 40 minutes outside the city limits, its weathered siding and overgrown yard, the perfect camouflage of abandonment that hides the reinforced door and surveillance system underneath the decay. Inside smells like stale coffee and sleepless nights, every surface covered with maps and photographs connected by red string that charts conspiracy like veins of infection spreading through the body of institutions I spent my life defending. Parker settles Jacob on a worn couch with cartoons playing on a tablet, the volume turned up to mask adult conversations the boy shouldn't absorb into his innocent understanding of the world. While I stand frozen in the center of this command post built from my daughter's blood and secrets, the flash drive slides into a laptop with a click that sounds like a door unlocking onto truth I'm terrified to enter, and Parker's fingers move across the keyboard with the muscle memory of someone who's reviewed this evidence 1,000 times, each viewing carving the details deeper into his soul. The screen fills with files, organized with Sarah's characteristic precision, that same methodical mind that earned her early promotions, and my proud lectures about following her path into command. Scanned documents bloom across the monitor, bank transactions routing through shell corporations. In countries that exist primarily as financial shadows, encrypted communications decoded through patience I recognize as my daughter's stubborn brilliance. Photographs of handshakes between uniformed officials and men whose faces trigger recognition I wish I could deny. Parker narrates in a voice scraped raw by grief that never finished. Processing, pointing to names that land like artillery shells against the foundation of my career. Admiral Westbrook, who played golf at my retirement party. Colonel Morrison, who served as my attaché in Germany. Others wearing ranks and reputations that seemed as permanent as marble monuments. The broker didn't just infiltrate military intelligence, Parker explains, while my hands gripped the desk edge to keep the room from tilting. They created a marketplace where our highest-ranking officers auctioned classified operations to hostile nations, terrorist organizations, anyone with cryptocurrency and no conscience. Then Parker opens a folder that makes his expression crack around the edges, revealing photographs of Sarah pregnant, radiant with secret joy, in images clearly taken without official knowledge or documentation. The boy, Jacob. He's not my biological son, General, he says, and the words arrive like ordnance I should have seen coming, but somehow missed completely. He's Sarah's child, your grandson conceived. During a relationship she kept hidden because the broker had already threatened everyone she loved, and she knew a child would become leverage they'd use to control her or destroy us all. My vision blurs as Parker shows me a birth certificate listing false parents, medical records under an assumed name, legal documents creating an identity constructed entirely from protective lies, meant to keep this beautiful boy breathing in a world that wanted to weapon his existence. Jacob looks up from his cartoons at that precise moment, his face catching light from the window in a way that suddenly, devastatingly reveals Sarah in the curve of his cheek and the set of his eyes. My daughter, living on in this child I'm meeting for the first time beside her grave. Grandpa, he says, with the tentative hope of someone testing a word he's been taught but never spoken aloud, and the single syllable detonates something in my chest that 3 years of grief had carefully contained. Parker's hand finds my shoulder as I sink into the nearest chair, my carefully constructed understanding of my daughter's life and death collapsing like a building demolition, every floor of assumption pancaking onto the next, until I'm sitting in the rubble of what I thought I knew. The laptop screen glows with evidence of treason. The safe house creaks with the weight of danger closing in, and my grandson watches me with eyes that hold my daughter's determination mixed with a child's desperate need to finally belong to someone who won't disappear when the shooting starts. Jacob slides off the couch with the unconscious grace of childhood, his small hands clutching something against his chest like a treasure he's been waiting for. Permission to reveal. The cartoons continue their cheerful noise behind him, a surreal soundtrack to the moment he approaches me with eyes that mirror Sarah's determination when she'd made a decision that couldn't be unmade. "Mommy said to give you this when I met you," he whispers, extending a handmade birthday card decorated with crayon drawings of soldiers and hearts, the construction paper soft with age and handling, every crease a testament to how many times my daughter must have held this herself before entrusting it to her son's safekeeping. My hands tremble as I accept it, the simple weight of folded paper somehow heavier than any medal or commendation I ever received, and when I open it, Sarah's handwriting sprawls across the inside, that familiar penmanship from 1,000 childhood notes and academy letters, accompanied by a small device Parker immediately recognizes as a secure video player. Parker helps me activate it with fingers more steady than mine, and suddenly Sarah materializes on the screen, alive and present in a way that stops my heart and restarts it simultaneously. She's sitting in anonymous housing somewhere, her hair pulled back in the practical style she wore off duty, and her eyes hold knowledge of the danger she's swimming through, even as she smiles with the warmth I remembered from before everything went dark. "Hi, Dad," she says, her voice threading through 3 years of silence to reach me in this safe house built from her paranoia and love. "If you're watching this, it means Jacob found you, which means I didn't make it home. And I'm so sorry for every lie I had to tell, every distance I had to create, every normal moment I stole from all of us." Her words flow with the cadence of someone who's rehearsed this confession countless times, each phrase weighted with the impossible choices she faced between duty and family, between exposing corruption and protecting the people who gave her purpose beyond the uniform. The video continues as Sarah explains the pregnancy she hid, the relationship she fabricated evidence against, to make herself appear uninvolved and unattached, the elaborate network of protection she constructed around Jacob, using trusted allies like Parker, who loved her enough to become a father to her secret child. The broker has eyes everywhere, Dad. In our command structures, our intelligence networks, places so deep I couldn't risk anyone knowing about Jacob, because the moment they discovered I had a son, he'd become a weapon pointed at my compliance or my destruction, she says, and tears track down her recorded face, each one a small surrender to the fear she never showed me in life. Her hands gesture as she speaks, that familiar animation I'd watched across dinner tables and parade grounds, now explaining why she stopped calling as frequently, why her letters became shorter, why the last time I saw her alive, she seemed distant in ways I attributed to operational stress rather than the conspiracy drowning her from within. Then Sarah leans closer to whatever camera captured this message, her expression shifting into something fierce and tender simultaneously, the warrior and mother occupying the same breath. "Take care of Jacob, teach him about honor without the cost I paid for it. Love him enough for both of us, and Dad, finish what I started, because some fights are worth dying for. But more importantly, they're worth living for, and I need you to show my son what that looks like." The screen goes black as her final words hang in the air like smoke after artillery fire, and Jacob climbs into my lap with the instinct of a child who's waited his entire short life for this grandfather his mother promised would someday hold him, and I wrap my arms around my daughter's living legacy while Parker turns away to hide tears of his own. The safe house shatters into chaos when the windows explode inward. Not from bullets, but from concussive grenades that fill the rooms with blinding smoke and disorienting noise. Through the haze, figures in tactical gear move with professional efficiency, and I'm reaching for Jacob even as Parker throws himself between the attackers and my grandson, his training overriding every paternal instinct except the most essential one. But there are too many of them. Their movements coordinated in ways that speak of military backgrounds turned toward darker purposes, and within seconds that feel like hours. Rough hands tear Jacob from my desperate grip, while others pin Parker and me against the floor with the cold precision of men who've done this countless times before. Jacob's scream cuts through the ringing in my ears, not his voice, but Sarah's echoing across time and death. And I watch helplessly as they carry him toward the shattered doorway, his small arms reaching back toward us like a drowning victim, grasping for rescue that won't arrive in time. The leader remains behind, crouching beside me, with a phone displaying my grandson's terrified face in real-time video, insurance against any heroic desperation we might consider. The broker sends his regards and a simple transaction proposal, he says with the affectless tone of someone negotiating livestock rather than a child's life. All of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen's evidence, every file, every recording, every backup, delivered to coordinates we'll provide within 12 hours, or the boy disappears into systems even your considerable connections won't penetrate. Parker struggles against the knee pressed into his spine, his seal training, warring with the fundamental helplessness of watching his son become a bargaining chip, and I see in his eyes the same terrible calculation I'm performing, weighing Sarah's justice against Jacob's breath, her mission against his childhood, the abstract concept of honor against the concrete reality of a 6-year-old who just learned his grandfather's name. The tactical team withdraws like smoke clearing, leaving us with zip-tied wrists, a burner phone for our response, and the impossible choice Sarah died trying to prevent. Between the truth she sacrificed everything to preserve and the innocent life she created in the shadows of that sacrifice, Parker and I sit in the wreckage of our temporary safety, the Cartoon Channel still playing its oblivious programming on the overturned television, and I hold the birthday card Jacob gave me with hands that feel ancient and useless. Sarah knew this moment might come, Parker says finally, his voice scraped raw with fear and fury, braiding into something actionable. She prepared. Contingencies, backup plans, people who owed her debts they'd die to repay. We're not choosing between justice and Jacob because there's a third option she built precisely for this scenario. He meets my eyes across the debris of our shattered sanctuary, and I recognize the look of a warrior transitioning from defense to offense, from victim to aggressor. The shift Sarah must have seen in him that made her trust this man with everything she couldn't tell me. The burner phone sits between us like a ticking device, counting down toward either surrender or war, and I realize my daughter's final gift wasn't just the truth about her death or the grandson I never knew existed. It was this moment, this choice, this chance to prove that her faith in both of us wasn't misplaced when she built her house of secrets on our combined foundations. Parker moves to the table with the focused intensity of a warrior transitioning from grief to action, spreading tactical maps and photographs across the scarred wood surface like a general planning invasion rather than rescue. Your daughter didn't just collect evidence, she built a network, he says, his finger tracing connections between faces I recognize from decades of military service, allies Sarah cultivated in shadows I never knew she walked. She knew the broker had resources, so she matched them, creating a web of operators, intelligence assets, and leverage points that activate the moment her dead man's switch fails to receive her weekly signal, which it hasn't for 3 years. His voice carries the weight of a promise kept through unbearable patience, and I see now why Sarah chose this man not just as her partner, but as the guardian of everything she couldn't entrust to official channels. The maps show a compound outside the city, a converted industrial facility where thermal imaging indicates concentrated activity in the basement levels, and Parker's planning has the precision of someone who's studied this target with obsessive dedication, waiting for the moment circumstances would force his hand. I have access to resources that don't officially exist, I tell him, pulling out my phone to contact men who owe me debts measured in lives saved and careers protected, the invisible currency of a flag officer's decades of service. Within an hour, the safe house transforms into an operations center as 3 former special operations soldiers arrive. Without questions, their loyalty to me absolute enough to walk into hell on a 12-hour notice. Parker briefs them with the clinical efficiency of someone who's run dozens of extractions, but his voice breaks only once when he shows them Jacob's picture, the vulnerability of a father bleeding through the operator's professional facade. The broker's security will be military grade, but they're expecting negotiation, not assault, he explains, marking entry points and extraction routes with hands that tremble almost imperceptibly. We hit them in the pre-dawn window when circadian rhythms make even trained guards vulnerable, fast and surgical before they can threaten the boy. The cow equipment arrives in unmarked cases, weapons that don't appear in any registry, communications gear encrypted beyond government standards, breaching charges calibrated for precise application. Parker checks each piece with ritualistic care, and I recognize the meditation of a warrior preparing for battle, the way he's channeling fear for his son into the cold calculations that might save Jacob's life. Sarah made me promise something the night before her last operation, he says quietly, as we prepare to move out, his eyes meeting mine with an honesty that hurts to witness. She said, if anything happened to her, I had to make sure you knew she never stopped being your daughter, that every secret she kept was an act of love, not distance, and that I should protect you and Jacob with the same fierce devotion she couldn't show you herself. The words land like absolution and indictment simultaneously, revealing the depth of what my daughter felt but couldn't express. And I understand now that this mission isn't just rescue, but redemption, a chance to honor Sarah's sacrifice by completing what she died trying to finish. We move into the night with the coordinated precision of men who've spent lifetimes perfecting the application of controlled violence toward righteous ends, and I feel my daughter's presence in every step, her tactical mind having anticipated this exact scenario and prepared the pieces that might checkmate the broker's seemingly superior position. Parker takes point with the focused intensity of a father willing to descend into any darkness to retrieve his son, and I follow with the grim determination of a grandfather who's already lost one generation but refuses to surrender another. The compound rises before us like a fortress of modern evil, its lights burning against the pre-dawn darkness, and I whisper a prayer not to God but to Sarah, asking her spirit to guide our hands and steady our aim as we breach the walls that separate us from Jacob. The operation clock starts now, measured not in hours but in heartbeats, each second, bringing us closer to either reunion or irreversible tragedy. And I feel the weight of command settle over me one final time, not as a flag officer, but as a grandfather who's finally learned that some battles transcend duty and touch the savage core of what it means to protect family at any cost. The breach comes with explosive precision, charges, blowing hinges inward as we flood through smoke and chaos into corridors that smell of concrete dust and gun oil. Our movements synchronized through years of training that muscle memory resurrects instantly. Parker moves like liquid violence through the facility's upper levels, each room cleared with brutal efficiency as resistance crumbles before operators who fight with the desperation of men who cannot afford failure, and bodies drop with the finality of chess pieces swept from a board. We descend into basement levels where fluorescent lights flicker over server banks and holding cells, the infrastructure of an empire built on betrayal, and my heart hammers against my ribs as we breach the final door to find Jacob bound but unharmed, his tear-streaked face transforming with relief as Parker sweeps him into arms that tremble with gratitude too profound for words. But triumph curdles instantly as emergency lighting bathes the corridor in red, and a voice I recognize with soul-crushing clarity echoes through speakers mounted in the ceiling. "Stand down, Admiral. There's nowhere left to run." Colonel Marcus Webb steps from shadows at the corridor's end, service weapon drawn but pointed casually downward, his familiar face wearing an expression of resigned pragmatism. I've seen 1,000 times across conference tables and command briefings. 23 years I served under you, he says with something approaching genuine regret. Mentored, promoted, trusted with secrets that could reshape continents. And you never once saw what Sarah saw immediately, that I was always smarter than the system that tried to contain me. The words hit like physical blows because they carry truth I cannot deny. Recognition that my daughter possessed instincts I failed to cultivate, seeing corruption where I saw only dedication. Parker shifts protectively in front of Jacob, weapon trained on Webb with the steady aim of someone calculating angles and probabilities, but my former aide merely shakes his head with paternal disappointment. The broker isn't an organization, Admiral, it's a philosophy. The understanding that information has replaced territory as the currency of power, and those who control its flow control everything. Webb's explanation carries the conviction of someone who genuinely believes his treason represents evolution rather than betrayal. And I see now how Sarah must have felt discovering this. Cancer within institutions she'd sworn to defend. She would have been extraordinary if she'd joined us instead of trying to destroy what she didn't understand. But stubbornness runs in your family, apparently. His words about my daughter ignite rage that burns through tactical calculation, and I understand with crystal clarity that some betrayals can only be answered with absolute consequences. The standoff stretches across seconds that feel like hours, Webb's finger tightening on his trigger as Parker's stance shifts with predatory intent. And I know with the certainty of decades commanding men in crisis that this moment will define whether Sarah's sacrifice meant anything at all. My weapon rises with the smooth deliberation of muscle memory forged through countless qualifications, centered on the chest of a man I once trusted with my career and my confidence, and I see surprise flash across Webb's features as he recognizes that some lines, once crossed, sever all bonds that previously existed. The shot echoes through the basement like thunder, final and irrevocable, and Webb crumples with the stunned expression of someone who genuinely never believed I possessed the capacity for such definitive action, his last breath escaping as whispered disbelief that the mentor he betrayed would ultimately be the instrument of his ending. The morning sun breaks through oak branches with cathedral-like reverence as we stand before Sarah's grave 3 weeks after Webb's death and the broker's collapse, the granite marker no longer representing just loss, but testament to courage that reshaped everything I believed about sacrifice and duty. Jacob clutches my hand with the unconscious trust of a child who's finally found safe harbor, while Parker stands with military bearing that cannot quite hide the grief-softened edges of a man learning to be father rather than warrior. Federal investigators have spent weeks dismantling the network Sarah exposed, dozens of arrests rippling through agencies that thought themselves untouchable, and her name, once buried beneath ill-classified redactions, now surfaces in presidential briefings as the operative who prevented catastrophe through vision I failed to recognize. I kneel slowly, joints protesting age I suddenly feel acutely, and withdraw the final letter from my jacket with hands that tremble despite decades commanding fleets through storms, both literal and political. Her handwriting transforms the paper into something sacred, each loop and curve carrying personality that surveillance footage and after-action reports could never capture. The daughter I knew through duty rather than intimacy, now speaking across the barrier death erected between us. "Dad," the letter begins with simple directness that feels like her voice in my ear. "If you're reading this, Parker kept his promise, and you know the truth I couldn't share while breathing. That sometimes protecting those we love means accepting their hatred for choices they cannot understand." My voice cracks, reading aloud, words meant for my eyes now shared with the two people who represent Sarah's legacy more completely than any medal or memorial. Jacob deserves the childhood I sacrificed, birthday parties and scraped knees, and bedtime stories without operational security protocols shadowing every moment of joy. Give him the normalcy I chose to abandon, and help him understand his mother loved him enough to become the shield between innocence and the darkness that never stops hunting. Parker's hand settles on my shoulder with pressure that communicates solidarity beyond language. This man who loved my daughter carrying his own burden of promises made to someone who exists now only in memory and consequence. Jacob tugs my sleeve with the impatience of 5-year-old attention. Spans, his grandmother's eyes staring from features that mirror Sarah's with haunting precision, and I realize grief must coexist with responsibility rather than replace it. "Tell me about Mommy," he requests, with the casual expectation of children who haven't learned some questions carry unbearable weight, and I find myself smiling through tears as stories begin flowing. Not the sanitized hero narrative of official records, but the messy, beautiful truth of a daughter who fought for principles she valued more than breath itself. We stand together as morning stretches toward afternoon. 3 generations bound by blood and sacrifice, and I understand finally that Sarah's greatest operation wasn't exposing corruption, but building this fragile, precious family from the wreckage of impossible choices. The evidence she compiled will reshape institutions for decades, but her true legacy stands beside me, holding a toy soldier, waiting to learn who his mother was beyond the mission that claimed her life. Would you sacrifice everything for the truth, or choose the lie that keeps your family safe? Subscribe to uncover more stories where honor demands impossible choices.